The Telescope is widely regarded as the first game-changing episode of BoJack Horseman. After Season 1's rocky start, this episode set the show apart from other adult animated sitcoms by refusing to resolve the conflict by the end credits, instead maintaining lasting consequences for the characters. The Telescope examines the definitive ending of BoJack's relationship with Herb Kazzaz. As both the creator of Horsin Around and BoJack's former best friend, Herb had a permanent, lasting effect on BoJack's life. And in BoJack's last-ditch effort to make amends, the Telescope shows us that not all relationships or mistakes are afforded closure.
By the time you realize you're sinking, it's too late.
BoJack first met Herb Kazzaz doing stand-up comedy in 1985. While performing as an up-and-comer, BoJack was heckled by Herb, and after the show, he showed his appreciation for Herb's comments.
Get cancer, jerkwad.
Despite this, Herb helped BoJack workshop his material, and they quickly became close friends. Herb provided the kind of supportive, non-judgmental criticism BoJack needed to become a good performer. Prior to this, BoJack was very awkward on stage, trying to force an audience reaction even when his jokes didn't land. This makes sense, as while he was growing up, he was trained to receive conditional love from his mother Beatrice by performing at her supper club parties. It makes sense why BoJack became a comedian. Because of his upbringing, he highly values the opinions of others and persistently seeks their approval. So as a beginning stand-up, BoJack is constantly repeating the punchline and asking if the audience gets it. This is not unlike the letter he wrote to Secretariat as a child, seen in the episodes Later and Brand New Couch.
When I grow up, I want to be just like you, and I think I'm on the right track. Get it? Track, because horses run on tracks, and you are a horse, and I am a horse. Do you get it? Do you get my joke?
We also see his approval-seeking tendencies in high school in the episode A Horse Walks into a Rehab. To win over his classmates, he performs a mean-spirited roast of a lovely girl from his class. BoJack struggled to know when he'd gone too far or what would get laughs, but still craved the attention of an audience. With Herb's supportive positivity and persistent banter, BoJack's confidence increased and his performances improved. Before his success on Horsin Around, BoJack's personality was a far cry from the horse we all know. Along with Herb and Herb's girlfriend Charlotte, BoJack was friendly, supportive, and enthusiastic, even as they struggled to make it big.
Thanks, Charlotte, but one beer gets me tipsy. I gotta be clear-headed for my set.
When Herb gets the opportunity to pitch his sitcom to some network executives, Charlotte reveals her concerns about BoJack's inevitable success.
I'm not worried about if you'll become a star. I'm more worried about how you'll change when it happens.
This highlights a key aspect of BoJack's personality that we see throughout the show. He lacks the moral compass to consistently do the right thing. Much of this is due to his upbringing, but he lacks the self-worth and backbone needed to do what's right in difficult situations. He often deflects responsibility and fixates on his own personal short-term gains. He sabotaged Todd's rock opera to avoid losing his codependent relationship with his roommate. He stole the Hollywood D in a misguided attempt to woo Diane. He exaggerated his romantic interest in Princess Carolyn to distract himself from Diane's engagement. All of these choices were emotionally immature, flimsy attempts to soothe his own ego. He never considered how his actions affected those around him and often ran from the consequences. As we know, Charlotte's warnings turned out to be prophetic. Eventually, at the Griffith Park Observatory, Herb gives BoJack a telescope, symbolic of their friendship. He makes a promise to BoJack about later returning to the planetarium to celebrate.
And when we're both famous and have everything we've ever wanted, we'll come back here together and high-five.
Herb finally tells BoJack the good news. His series has been picked up by ABC, but he gave them one condition.
And I told those suits, if they want my show, then that horse is gonna be BJ goddamn Horseman.
Herb truly believed in BoJack's abilities and wanted to give him every opportunity for success, something BoJack never had from his parents.
You're gonna be a big success. Herb says it to me all the time. He thinks the world of you.
After a few years on Horsin Around, BoJack's attitude had changed entirely, and his ego had inflated. BoJack insulted the show's writing and treated the crew terribly, and of course, created a huge rift with Herb.
Just get out there and do your job. Every one of your ideas is stupid or racist.
The success had gotten to BoJack's head, and he had bought into his own hype at the expense of others, including the people who had gotten him there in the first place. BoJack was already sinking, and it was too late.
I think you're a coward.
By the early 1990s, BoJack was riding high on the success of Horsin Around. He was finally up for consideration as the lead actor in Secretariat, his dream role. However, Herb was arrested for public indecency during a police raid. This publicly outed his sexual orientation in the process. As a result, conservative groups protested Horsin Around as being inappropriate for families and pressured the network to fire Herb. At the time, being openly gay was an extremely risky move on network television. Casual homophobia was routinely used as a punchline, and until the creation of series like Krill and Grace or The Ellen Show, sincere representation representation was almost non-existent. Needing someone in his corner, Herb pled with BoJack to stick up for him. Without his support, Herb could be blacklisted from the industry forever.
If you threaten to walk, they'll listen to you.
BoJack admits that he wouldn't have a career without Herb, and he promises to threaten to walk away from the series unless they keep him on board. However, network exec Angela Diaz manipulates BoJack through his shortcomings and through his insecurities. She frames the poor optics for ABC and BoJack's career opportunities as more important than his friendship with Herb.
And you don't get to play the lead role in the Secretariat movie by being a good friend.
Truly unfortunate that BoJack didn't see how wrong Angela was here. Herb valued BoJack's friendship so much that he was insistent on having him cast as the lead in Horsin Around. He was willing to let the series pitch go if BoJack couldn't be there with him. BoJack literally owed his own success to somebody being a good friend to him. Interestingly, we saw that the entire remainder of BoJack's career was spent trying to get away from his image as the horse from Horsin Around, with the BoJack Horseman show, with his book One Trick Pony, with the eventual Secretariat movie. However, the one project that did break that image for him was Filbert, a project he only did as a favor for Princess Carolyn, by being a good friend. After Angela's manipulative speech, BoJack keeps his mouth shut and passively allows her to fire Herb to save his own career.
You're doing the right thing. I know it's hard, but if Herb's really your friend, he'll understand.
The Secretariat movie ends up in development hell, and BoJack's betrayal amounts to nothing. Horsin Around goes back into production for 2 more seasons with Danny Bananas as the showrunner, and BoJack continues to lie to himself on set, reassuring the rest of the cast that he did all he could to save the show.
Herb, Danny, what difference does it make? We got a job to do, right?
I'm just saying I miss him.
And I'm just saying, it's not my fault he got fired.
In reality, BoJack was just a coward.
20 years. You didn't call me.
In the 20 years after Horsin Around stopped airing, BoJack and Herb handled their lives in notably different ways. Despite the massive loss of his career and Horsin Around, Herb didn't give up his chance at a fulfilling life.
Did you think that I spent the last 20 years on my couch just feeling sorry for myself?
He stayed in contact with the kids from Horsin Around and gave them the same advice and support he previously gave to BoJack. He also redirected his wealth and attention into starting various impactful charities. In spite of everything, Herb never stopped wanting to help people in need.
I also started a charity to bring clean water to millions of children in sub-Saharan Africa.
Meanwhile, BoJack fully stagnated with nothing of note in his career after the sitcom ended, besides his massive failure, The BoJack Horseman Show. When we catch back up with BoJack, he's spending his days drinking, rewatching old Horsin Around episodes, and trying to relive his glory days. And despite reliving his glory days, he never once reached out to Herb, only touching base after hearing about his terminal cancer.
I think we have some unfinished business. It seems like life's too short to hold grudges and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying?
With the few remaining friends he had left, BoJack subconsciously fostered an unbalanced power dynamic in an attempt to keep them close, his abandonment of Herb likely fueling his own fear of being abandoned himself. Secretariat's advice to BoJack years earlier on the Dick Cavett Show may have also played a role in BoJack's treatment of Herb.
There are people in your life who are going to try to hold you back, slow you down, but you don't let them. Don't you stop running, and don't you ever look behind you. There's nothing for you behind you.
Given that BoJack left Herb entirely behind him after he was fired from Horsin Around, it sounds like Secretariat's advice really stuck with him.
Why didn't you call me? Huh? 20 years. You didn't call me. That's you. That's BoJack Horseman.
When BoJack finally does reach out to Herb, it does not go over well.
I got your message, asshole. You got something to say to me? You come out to Malibu and say it to my face.
In their final time seeing each other, despite some playful cutting remarks from Herb at BoJack's expense, there is clear lingering chemistry even after all these years. They banter like old times, roasting overpriced blenders, and the day nearly ends with Herb genuinely appreciating the visit.
And it was actually nice to see you, BoJack.
However, BoJack is desperate for closure, and he pursues Herb to try and apologize. Herb does not accept the apology.
Herb, I said I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I do not forgive you.
Ultimately, BoJack's apology was entirely self-serving. He was only there to make himself feel better. He didn't address what he did or show any signs of ownership for the aftermath of Herb's firing. There's no recognition of how much he hurt Herb's feelings or how he was a bad friend, and a ticking clock was not going to change that. BoJack was too used to the happy endings and closure of sitcoms to comprehend the possibility that Herb wouldn't forgive him, but Herb held firm.
You have to live with the shitty thing you did for the rest of your life. You have to know that it's never, ever going to be okay.
What hurt Herb the most wasn't BoJack's backstabbing decision under the pressure from the network. He understood that it was a difficult and risky decision to make. He even said he didn't care about the show. What hurt Herb most was that he lost BoJack.
But what I needed then was a friend. And you abandoned me. And I will never forgive you for that.
Before leaving, BoJack spies the telescope from all those years ago. He tries to take it, but Herb stops him and they get in a fight, breaking the telescope in the process. A harrowing metaphor for the clear end of their friendship.
You'd probably sleep a lot better at night if you just admitted to yourself that you're a selfish goddamn coward who takes whatever he wants and doesn't give a shit about who he hurts.
This is, of course, reflective of BoJack's deepest insecurities. He is incredibly self-conscious of his image, but will generally rationalize his behavior as being a victim of circumstance. That's part of the reason he wanted to write One Trick Pony in the first place, to contextualize his entire life in a way that doesn't make him out to be the bad guy. It's why he was so upset when he eventually read Diane's draft of the book.
Good luck making Horsin Around without the horse.
BoJack is again trying to rewrite the narrative so that he can feel better about what he did. Diane even offers to remove the encounter from the book, but BoJack refuses.
Nah, it's okay. Full truth. Like we agreed. Warts and all.
Even after Herb's death, BoJack's failures and his friendship with Herb deeply influenced him. During Herb's funeral, BoJack rallies the Horsin Around cast to go on a scavenger hunt for Herb's gold, which he mistakenly believed was set up by Herb himself. BoJack sees this as his last chance to do right by Herb, even after his passing. However, Herb's gold turns out to be a terrible manuscript, stolen by Henry Winkler in order to protect Herb's reputation.
I just wanted to fix things. Somehow.
I'm sorry, horse guy, but you can't.
BoJack also donates his newfound increase in Horsin Around residuals to an orphanage, naming it in Herb's honor, albeit with a typo.
You know, Herb would probably think that this is pretty funny that you couldn't even get this right.
Yeah, he would.
But the clearest example of BoJack's guilty conscience in regards to Herb maintaining a chokehold on him was his near-death experience at the end of season 6. During the big show in The View from Halfway Down, that's meant to close out BoJack's entire life, Herb is the master of ceremonies and guides him through the process. BoJack even directly reflects on his life at dinner, citing the bond he had with Herb as inspiration for his career as a theater professor.
It reminded me of when I was young, just starting out. You and me, screwing around, hitting up open mics, trying to figure it out. I think that was the best part.
It's clear that one of BoJack's deepest regrets in his entire life is how he treated Herb and the loss of the lasting friendship he could have had if he were not a coward. And this couldn't have been made more apparent than after One Trick Pony released and became a massive success, earning BoJack a Golden Globe. BoJack went back to the Griffith Observatory to celebrate, just as Herb suggested, but they weren't together. There wouldn't be any high fives, just BoJack, alone.
No, I'm not scared, BJ. The future is bright. Just look at it.
Johnny! Two cellos!